The crack of a wooden bat, the smell of fresh cooked Cracker Jacks and hot dogs, the sounds of hundreds of fans cheering on their favorite team. The sport of baseball is loved by many and coined one of America's pastimes. One of the most favored and well-known teams is the Los Angeles Dodgers, which have only been a part of the city for about 60 years now. While loved by many Angelinos, several fans still do not know about the history of the move from Brooklyn over to LA. Today, I'll be sharing a bit of information with you on how the construction of Dodger Stadium played a key role in the displacement of hundreds of Mexican American families in the 1950s. I've been studying this topic for the past few months now in an attempt to shed some light on it, as well as talk about a piece of history seldom discussed. We'll be focusing on the communities known as Bishop, La Loma, and Palo Verde. The three communities of Bishop, La Loma, and Palo Verde were recognized as established communities by the city of LA in the 1920s. These communities saw steady growth in their population over the next few decades, and by the 1950s had about 600 homes combined. They also had a plethora of stores, farms, schools, and a church. About 85% of the residents of Bishop, La Loma, and Palo Verde were Mexican American. And in an article written by John Karagosian, he states that this was largely due to segregation still running about in that time that kept Mexican Americans from being able to buy property in other parts of LA. While these communities did not see much funding from the city, they still thrived with what little resources and economy they actually had. Most of the homes were built by their respective homeowners, and repairs to roads, new construction, new developments were generally done by the people in these same communities. They lived pretty peacefully up until July of 1950, when the communities received letters from the city of LA stating that they needed to sell their homes or they would lose their homes through eminent domain and be condemned anyways. This was a product of the city of LA deciding that new public housing developments were essential after World War II to combat the housing shortage, and felt that the land of Bishop, La Loma, and Palo Verde was the best place for this new development. While the letters that the residents received did have the promise of giving the residents first pick at the new public housing, this actually didn't extend to everyone, because anyone who was an illegal immigrant or a registered homeowner didn't have that same access. To make matters worse, the promise was never fulfilled, as shortly after these letters were sent out, the decision for the public housing development was actually revoked by the city council in an 8-7 decision. This was due to rampant McCarthyism going around the country, so a lot of people saw this choice of public housing as socialism or communism, and as such, the city council didn't really want anything to do with it. Instead of giving the people back their homes or back their land, the city was told they were allowed to keep it so long as it was used for some sort of a public service. Some years later, in 1957, the owner of the then Dodgers met up with the mayor of LA, decided on an agreement, and the land of Bishop, La Loma, and Palo Verde was sold away to the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers, Mr. Walter O'Malley. Up until the construction of the Dodger Stadium, many people were trying to combat this home foreclosure and this condemnation of their homes, but were unfortunately not very successful. One final attempt at keeping their home was made by a man named Manuel Arechiga, who tried to use the reversal of the public housing development as reason in court to keep his house. He unfortunately was not successful in this endeavor. In 1962, the doors of Dodger Stadium opened, and the communities of Bishop, La Loma, and Palo Verde closed for good. The city of Los Angeles and most of its residents may refer to this part of land now as Chavez Ravine, but it is unfair to really call it that. Most of the people back then did not refer to it by that name, and the city that neglected them and turned their back on them has no right to wash away the names originally assigned to those powerful communities. A lot of attempts have been made to get either the city or the Dodgers to publicly announce or acknowledge this thing that they have done to communities once lost. But unfortunately, we've seen no real results of that. As such, it is a duty of ourselves to know about this history and talk about a piece of Dodgers history that is seldom discussed. May we never forget the communities of Bishop, Palo Verde, and La Loma. Thank you.